Hello and welcome to the latest episode in our series of conversations with English UK London champions and industry leaders. Today we're very lucky to have Mark Hilton, the Executive Director for People at London First. If you aren't familiar with London First, English UK London are members of this organisation, that they're all about campaigning to make London the best city in the world to do business. And I have to thank Mark in particular because he's been campaigning on our behalf, all sorts of things like business rates relief, the new immigration bill, Brexit and so on. And we're going to ask Mark about all of those things. So first up, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for having me, James. I'm good. I'm good, despite the challenging period over the last few months. It's good. It's good to have finally arrived at the summer period.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Now, many of our members at the moment, Mark, are very upset about. They feel that they've been overlooked on the business rates, which represent such a big proportion of costs for language schools in London. Could you share a little bit of who you've been speaking to, and other than a Churchillian never give up attitude, what practical steps do you think our members could take now to try and have this overturned?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really important issue there, James, and I mean, it's such a concern that English language schools are falling between the gap on this issue. I mean, I think ultimately, as you will realise, and as you've been pushing, your members, your schools should really be classified as education institutions for business rates in the first place. But you know. That's an argument that you've been having for many years, and no doubt will continue. But it's certainly something that you know, in my conversations with you and others in your sector, is fundamental to try and sort this out. So I've been working with people like the Greater London Authority, the Mayor of London, and his team, as well as London Councils, the organisation that represents the boroughs in London, and you know, encouragingly, they are sympathetic to the concerns that are raising, but that have been raised. The issue really is the you know, the appetite for boroughs to be able to use some of the relief grants and schemes that they have on this particular issue. I mean, clearly there are many businesses in many sectors who are experiencing severe problems as a result of COVID-19, and you know, you don't need me to tell you the issues that your sector is facing. So it is one that needs to be gripped, and I think that, you know, absolutely, this is not an issue to give up on. And I think the more that your individual schools and members can do to raise this loudly and clearly with local councils, local MPs, I think, you know, that will be really important to get that message across, to show the impact of not having that business rates relief on your sector, to show the value of your sector in the first place to London and to the UK, which is huge, as we know, and you know, a huge soft power generator, your sector. So the more that we can continue to raise consistently and loudly the messages, and you know, and I'll continue to do my bit, as I'm sure others will as well, raising it with those, you know, with central government, with the Mayor of London, and so on.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Mark. Now, you've recently wrote a report. It's something I'm actually personally very passionate about as well. I think we all know, sadly, that following COVID-19, it's going to cast a long shadow, particularly for the young generation that are coming either out of school or colleges and so on, the kind of 16 to 24-year-old market. And you've written this whole report touching on apprenticeships and skills and so on. Could you share a little bit about that for those that aren't aware about it? And if there are opportunities for our members, be it potentially as a provider or indeed themselves taking on people through the Kickstart and all the other programs that have come available or supposedly coming online and so on. Could you share about that?
Of course. I mean, we've always worked on the skills agenda at London First pretty much ever since we began over 25 years ago. It's such an important part of London's success to have kind of a talent pipeline that business can tap into, and that's one of the massive attractions of London. You know, we are a melting pot of diverse talents, and business recognises that. One of the things that we wanted to do with the Skilling London report you mentioned is look at how we can bring business, education, and government policymakers better together to collaborate more on solutions. So we looked at some of the long-standing issues in the skills agenda, like the concerns that business have about the lack of transferable skills. You know, those skills like critical thinking, or ability to present yourself, turn up to work on time, those kind of things, which schools in the UK could be better at teaching, to be fair. So we looked at how business and schools and colleges could work better together on issues like that. And we looked at the difficulty that everyone has in navigating London's skills system. It's so complicated. There's so many players, and no wonder it's hard for young people and parents to kind of find their way through to the jobs and training that they need. We looked at a whole heap of other issues, including the lack of diverse role models for many people in London's communities. That's a real barrier. People need to be able to see people like them, to inspire their future career and to look ahead. So, we took on a whole range of issues. And then, of course, a lot of this came into sharp relief as a result of COVID, as you say. And unfortunately, young people have been hit the hardest as a result of COVID. Many more young Londoners have been furloughed or made redundant as a result of the pandemic. Overall in London, something like 1.2 million people have been furloughed, which is an incredible number. So there are huge challenges ahead, but this is an opportunity for us to grip this, and it's great to see the government come out with its jobs plan. As you say, things like the Kickstart scheme, the incentives to around taking on new apprenticeships, an extra £2,000 for businesses to take on each apprentice, £1,000 for each trainee. These are all good things and should be supported. So I would encourage your members to look at these incentives and see what works for them. We've had many apprenticeships over the years at London First, and they're a good addition to the team. They bring a good different perspective on life, which can only benefit. I think what we really need, just to finish up on this point, is the government to have kind of longer term thinking around skills, a longer term plan. And indeed a long-term investment plan, because only through investing in our sectors like yours and like construction, getting things built, only that will create the jobs that we need. And that's the way we should go.
I wholeheartedly agree. Now we've done the C word. Dare I say now the B word. We've had a few iterations of the immigration bill and so on. It's now, I believe, with the Lords. One of the big issues, and I appreciate that you don't have a crystal ball and so on, but just because you have a more unique view on things, probably one of the big issues, not just for our members, but also for our partners in Europe, is this concern about passports and whether teenagers, and I'm particularly thinking about the Italian market, we have a lot of Italian sort of 13 to 17-year-olds that like to come and spend the summer in the UK. And as it stands, they will have to have a passport as opposed to coming on an ID card or some form of visa for a group to come together. Where do you think we go from here? I mean, is it any likelihood that this may pass through the Lords and therefore go back to the Commons, or what are the steps that they will be taking and so on?
As you say, James, it's passed through the Commons last week. We've had the second reading. It's gone to the Lords, and traditionally the Lords tend to kind of be a bit more kind of have a bit of more of a high level of scrutiny of these types of things than perhaps the Commons do. I mean, the biggest issue for us, to approach this question from a broad perspective, first of all, is, we're concerned that two things. One, that the bill gives the government, perhaps excessive powers over immigration policy and operations, and essentially the bill will allow the government to introduce new rules and regulations through secondary legislation, rule changes as we've seen over the last few years. And given how important the immigration system is to the UK, that's a concern. So we would like to see the ability for the House to have a higher level of scrutiny and involvement in future policy changes. So there's that one. We're also concerned that the bill, some of the thinking, not so much around the bill itself, but around the new points-based system is unfortunately mired in a kind of old thinking. One of the positives of COVID is how we've begun to see essential workers more positively and the role that they play. And of course, many essential workers in the UK are from Europe and beyond. And we need to celebrate those people. We need to continue to attract those people. Yet the points-based system doesn't allow for so-called low-skilled, and I disagree. These people definitely aren't low-skilled. They are indeed low-paid in many cases, but using the government's terminology, they are termed as low-skilled. There is no route for these people to get in, so we've been pushing for temporary low-skilled visa. And we'll continue to do so. I know your colleague Jane joined one of our roundtables recently with the Home Office to help push that. On the issue of students, I think when it comes to ID cards, I think we have to be realistic. The government are very focused on control, and control for them means having a system based on passports. So I think this is a case of hoping for the best and lobbying for the best, and keep pushing the message that we need to continue with ID cards, at least for a time, and at least kind of phase them out for over a longer period, if that's the only way around this. But I think at the same time we need to be prepared and preparing for that switch over to passports, and anything that your members can do to encourage students from Italy and beyond to take up passports, or to look at other options beyond ID cards, which might be palatable, the better.
No, sage advice, thank you. So finally, just to round off, you've worked in London for a lot of your life and so on. We're taking part in the Because I'm a Londoner campaign. I just wondered, now that we're easing out of London, what are you personally looking forward to doing, and what are the bits about London that you love most?
We at London First are also supporting the Because I Am a Londoner campaign, which is fantastic. I mean, London is successful for many reasons. We are, as I was saying earlier, we are a kind of diverse melting pot of different cultures and people. And, that is one of the biggest selling points of London. We need more people to come and join in and contribute and celebrate the vast differences that London has to offer. I'm looking forward to be able to visit, the art galleries, the museums that have been that have been closed for so long that are beginning to open up again. You know, the types of theatre shows, which, you know, I think we're some way off theatres opening, unfortunately, and the creative sector have taken a bit of a hit. But the theatre shows, the live gigs, you know, we have such strengths in the UK around creativity and, you know, performing arts. You know, one of our crown jewels, if you like, and that's what I'm really looking forward to getting into. And, you know, the more that we can do to support those sectors, the better. And I'm really looking forward to getting back, hearing live music again, going to the theatre.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. On that note, thank you very much, Mark, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, James.